are the humanists. Now, humanists are religious scholars and writers who take the ideas of humanism, that thing that was so popular in Florence, and apply it to their faith. Humanists focus on education, on classical scholarship, learning Greek and Latin, as well as current languages, going back and trying to find the original. Now, humanists hate scholastics. Remember that, it's important. Scholastics are the ones who go back to authorities. Everything is about logic. It's about understanding God through the rational side of things. Humanists say that is just horse hooky, okay? No, 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 no. Part of the problem with the humanists, that the humanists have with the scholastics, is the fact that these scholars, these authorities that the scholastics are going to, oh, well, so-and-so in 212 AD wrote about, a lot of these authorities that they're quoting, the copies of the authorities they have are wrong. They're not copied correctly, or they're not translated correctly, and no one in this time period reads Hebrew. Most of them don't read Greek. They only read Latin, for example. I know it may come as a shock to some of you, but for the record, the Bible was not actually written in English. The Old Testament, or the first part of the Bible, was written in Hebrew, and the second part of the Bible, or the New Testament, was written in Greek. The Bibles that are being used in the church, the Bible that is printed on the Gutenberg press, is a translation of the Bible into the Latin language by a very dead guy named Jerome. Now, Saint Jerome, who translates the Bible into Latin, is originally doing it because he wants everyone to be able to read it. So he translates the Bible into the vulgar or common Latin language, which is Latin. That vulgar or common language translation becomes called the Vulgate, and that is the standard Bible throughout the medieval and Renaissance period. The problem is that that Latin translation has a lot of problems, and no one can double check the translation or the copy because they don't read Greek or Hebrew to compare the Latin version with the original. The first humanist scholar to really try to go back to the original version is a guy who wears funny hats. His name is Erasmus. Now, see him on the left, or on the right, rather? He's wearing a funny hat. I always remember Erasmus as the dude in the funny hat. Erasmus is a brilliant scholar, and he is a scholar. He is incredibly well educated, and he is interested with learning ancient languages and going back to the original, not simply trusting older authorities. Erasmus is, well, he's snarky as all get out. He constantly pokes fun at the corruption in the church. He objects to things like indulgences, people buying favors, church officials having wives and kids on the side, well, mistresses and kids on the side, and nobody objecting to the fact that they're breaking their promise to God. Erasmus hates the corruption in the church, and as a humanist, he believes that much of that corruption can be stopped and taken care of by education and going back to the originals. Erasmus publishes something really important that you need to remember. Erasmus publishes a parallel version of the New Testament. If you look at the picture, okay, there's two columns. If you look at the actual lettering, the typeface on the two columns, you're going to see they're really different from one another. On the left-hand side, there is a column with strange letters. Those letters are actually Greek. Erasmus goes back and actually makes a Greek copy of the New Testament of the Bible. Beside it on your right-hand side is the copy of the Vulgate. His translation, actually it is a different translation from the Vulgate. It is Erasmus' translation of the Greek into Latin. So basically the idea is Erasmus is saying, like a good humanist, Don't just trust the authorities. Don't just say, oh yeah, Jerome did this. Great Jerome, father of the church. Yes, we trust him. No. Erasmus is saying, don't trust Jerome. Don't trust me. Educate yourself. Look, here's the Greek on your left. Here's the Latin on your right. Compare them for yourself. Don't just believe what I tell you in the Latin. Look at the two. Be able to compare them directly. Understand the original. Don't just buy a later authority. This idea of going back to the original builds into one other thing. The scholastics say that God can be understood through reason and logic. I can't talk right now. The humanists say that that is not true. The humanists believe in something called the via moderna. The via moderna is the basic idea that reason can't limit or understand God. In other words, you can reason till you're blue in the face, and there are some religious things that, yeah, you can prove by logic. But there are some things in religion you're never going to be able to prove. That's why we use the word faith to describe religion, because there are points where you can't prove it, and either you believe it or you don't believe it. The scholastics don't go for that. The scholastics say, no, you can prove everything if you come up with the right logical argument. The humanists, with their via moderna, say, no, not true. God cannot be comprehended through logic. You have to add faith to the education and logic. You must go beyond simply looking at logical arguments, look at something bigger and acknowledge faith. Now, that major conflict between humanism and scholasticism, fueled by the power of the printing press and the deep desire of people to reform a church that everyone knew was corrupt, brings us to the beginning of the Reformation and to a German fellow by the name of Martin Luther. We'll talk about Martin Luther's biography, why he introduces the Reform movement, and what his reform means, not just for the church, but for kings, for princes, and for culture in general, in just a few minutes. Go take your quiz, and then move on to the next set of lectures.